Hi, welcome back to Engine Shop Joe, and I'm putting up a video for one of my followers, and thanks Tony for following the channel. And he's having so he has a problem with his cruise control, and he has some questions. So this is what's going on when he goes to set his cruise control. Sometimes the mile per hour on the vehicle will accelerate 5, 6, maybe up to 10 miles an hour before it seems to set and stay there. And sometimes he'll flip the cruise off because it feels like the engine's kind of running away, and then the cruise may not work again for half an hour. So I hope I got that right, Tony. Uh, so what I wanted to do was basically just explain how the cruise control works, and then on the Cummins system anyway, on that engine, and then I will tell you what I think could be the problem, and then I'll let you decide, uh, where to take it. But I will give you, I'll put in a few of my personal opinions on that. So first of all, on the cruise control, the ECM looks for two different switches. One is on and off, obviously, and then the other switch is set or resume. Now, set is when you hit the set button, and if you're driving 50 and hit set and take your foot off the gas, it should maintain 50. Uh, if the cruise is off and you turn it on and you hit resume, nothing will happen because you have to hit set first. So that's just the logic in the software. Set comes first, and then once you have it operational, then you can use resume. The second thing you need to know is that there are features and parameters or software adjustments that are tied to those switches to tailor them for certain conditions. So without knowing the calibration in your ECM, but knowing the year that it is, I don't suspect that you have pause or auto resume as an option, and those can be turned on. Now, if you do have those and you flip the cruise switch on, sometimes the vehicle will just speed up like the cruise put itself on. And it's like, what happened? And that is a setting where when you turn the cruise on, it'll resume either the last speed that you had it locked on at, or one that you can have put in by a mechanic. Say you want to cruise 70 only at 70, you can tell them to put that in. Whenever you bump that cruise on, it'll go right to 70. But I don't think that's the problem in your case. So what I think's happening in your system is when you turn it on, the on-off switch is working normally, but when you hit the set button, I think that the button might be sticking, or there's a problem with the switch or something on either the steering wheel or the column or whatever it is, because this is how the system works. So you have two wires that come out of the ECM that have a 5-volt float voltage. One wire is called set, one wire is called resume, and then there's a switch that actually, when you push it, shorts those to ground. So when you push the set switch in, it shorts the 5 volts to 0. That tells the ECM to look at the road speed and lock the number in. But if when you let go of that switch, it doesn't release the ground, it now tells it to accelerate. Now back over here in the features and parameters where you set the software adjustments, you can tell it with basically in its check boxes, you can tell it when I hold the set button down, once it's set and the cruise is engaged, if I hold the button down, it'll accelerate. Or you can set that software so that when I hold the set button down, once it's engaged, the cruise control's engaged, it's going to de-accelerate. Okay? The standard setting, if nobody messes with it, is When I hold set down, it will accelerate to a faster mile per hour. When I hold resume down, it will slow down to a slower mile per hour. And now, as a side note, if the engine's running and the vehicle's in park, transmission's in neutral, and you turn on the cruise switch, you can use set and resume to idle the engine up. Cummins calls that PTO mode because you normally use that to run a PTO that would run a pump or something, but motorhomes don't have PTOs off the transmission, but they will raise an RPM, and you can have that configured by a mechanic to whatever you want for either if you're running the AC and you got a high alternator load because all your lights are on, you might want to bump the engine up to 950 because it speeds the alternator up and it's less taxing on the batteries. So that's the idea with that. But back to your problem. So if that switch is sticking and maintaining ground, it'll set and then it will start to accelerate. Now, if the switch is stuck, so it's like you're holding it down and you flip the switch on off switch off, and then you turn the cruise back on, the cruise probably would not engage because the software is looking and it sees that the set switch is showing depressed and the off switch is off, and that's not something you would normally do. So logic may not allow it to re-engage. And then, so what's the deal with the half hour? Well, if it's a sticky switch, it might just be if you waited 2 minutes, it would re-engage. So that's one possibility. That's the one I would suspect. The second possibility is you have a wiring problem somewhere, or if the switches are on your steering wheel, sometimes you have trouble with the clock rings. Inside the steering wheel, there'll be a set of brass rings and rows and little carbon brushes that run on them. This is on the older stuff. And as you turn the wheel, that carbon brush is what makes the contact to the ring. So you can turn the wheel and the switches will be on the actual steering wheel. So you could have a problem in the steering wheel itself. You also could have a problem in the wiring. You could have a problem in the ECM, but I really doubt it. I would call that extremely rare. And if it was the ECM, the problem would, if it was a chip failure, the problem would be repeatable every time. It would have the exact same steps and same results every time. So I really don't think it's the ECM. So what I would do if it came to me, I would recalibrate the ECM. That drives all fresh software in there so it's thinking correctly in case something corrupted, but I don't think it did. And I would take Insight and go to the data logger monitor, and I would pull up your switches for the cruise, and I would get in and push the switch, and I'd watch to see if it released right away or if it stayed on. And if it stayed on set, I would push down resume immediately and see if it switched to resume or if they both run at the same time, which they never should be unless there's a switch problem. And then I would start the engine up and let it run. And remember I said when you're standing still with the parking brake on in neutral, those switches will make the engine ramp up. Well, let's say you've got it set to ramp to 850 when you hit set. If set is sticking, it's going to go to 850, 900, 950, 1,000. It'll keep going up until the engine hits the RPM cap that it's allowed to go to, which is around 1,400 RPM by default these days. I don't really remember what it was back then. So I suspect a switch problem or a clock spring problem in the steering wheel, something like that. Or if you have a box on a dash with switches, I would suspect that. If you got a problem where the ground wire the wires rub through and the ground's bumping when you hit the switch on the dash, the ground wire's bumping, that could be a problem. Now the last question you asked me is if you take it to Cummins, can they find it and fix it? I think they can find it. If it's a problem in the steering wheel, they probably aren't going to be taking the steering wheel apart. Now, there are Cummins distributors that have something called coach care at the distributor, and those people do bumper to bumper. So if you're going to go to Cummins, then I would suggest you call where you're intending on going and ask them if they have coach care available there. And if they don't, ask them, tell them where you're at and ask them what the closest branch is that supports coaches with coach care. And they would be able to fix whatever the problem was as long as they could get parts. Other than that, if you're going to go to a dealer, you'd probably want to go to a bigger coach dealer, and you'd want to call them and ask them if they have Insight software that supports the engines, if they can repair the engines, troubleshoot the engines. And if they say, yes, we can take care of the engine, and they sell the coaches, that is the model of coach that you own, then they probably would be able to do the thing one-stop shop and fix it there. If you went to a Cummins distributor that had coach care, they would probably have to go pick up parts or order parts for your coach where they might not have them in stock. So the best thing you can do, number one, is start making some phone calls to narrow down where you want to go. And then number two, I've given you enough background information that you understand the problem and kind of what's going on in that world with it. And then that way, when they come to you with a quote or whatever, you're going to have a little knowledge, so they can't, not that they would, but they can't quote you for things that maybe you don't need or something like that. Cummins is really good about being upfront and honest with people. That's one of the reasons I stayed there for 35 years. Everybody there that I knew at the time had integrity. When you travel outside that world, it's like anything else. Some dealers were not so upfront, and other ones were very upfront. So you just have to kind of feel that out. And now, because you have a basic understanding, you can make a better decision with that. So let us know how it turned out for you on the channel. Thanks for following my channel. And the goal of it is to help people like you and everybody else that has something that's Cummins powered. Have a good night. Thanks again. Take care. See you next time on Engine Shop Joe.